After Shevchenko's departure, Kaká would take over as Milan's star player. He would play everything and more. The world would bow down to his class, and everyone would understand that he was the best in the world, surpassing Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo. This is just one part of Kaká's story. If you haven't seen it, leave it in the comments and I'll do the second part for you to understand why Kaká is considered one of the greatest players in Brazil's history. After his failure in the 2006 World Cup, Kaká was determined to become the best he had ever been and would do anything to achieve that goal. He was at the peak of his physical fitness, and the whole world was surrendering to his quality. But one thing bothered the legend: the soccer system is cruel. If you don't tread carefully, you get lost very easily. What he meant was that when you're at the top of the world, all sorts of people appear in your life. People who only want to be close to you because of your fame and money, and these people you need to get away from. There were many temptations, but I remained steadfast to my ideals without deviating. In the 2006-2007, champions, Kaká made the competition his stage to parade. The first phase of the championship was extremely easy for Milan in the knockout rounds against Celtic. Kaká took off from midfield in his own style and was only stopped after scoring the winning goal in the 1-0 victory in the return leg in the quarterfinals. The Brazilian scored a goal in a 2-2 draw against Bayern in Milan, and in the semifinals he simply destroyed the Manchester United of Cristiano Ronaldo and company in the first game in Manchester. The English team opened the scoring, but Kaká wouldn't let it go and scored the first to tie the game and also scored the second to turn it around. But this time it was going to be a masterpiece. He won a tackle with the opposing defender and went for goal and only stopped when the ball died in the net, giving the Manchester goalkeeper no chance. But the English team didn't give up and scored 2 more goals soon after 3. 2 to Manchester. Kaká's game was so surprising that the opposing fans applauded him after his second goal. It was a dream come true for the legend. Only that the second game would be in Milan. Those goals of Kaká put the team in contention again. I can assure you that Cristiano Ronaldo will never forget that match. When the game started, everyone was expecting a spectacle, and that's exactly what they got. But only the Milan fans laughed at the end. Kaká once again played an absurd game, putting his teammates in front of goal several times, and when he arrived, he scored to put Milan 3-0 up, who destroyed the Manchester United dream team of Cristiano Ronaldo and Rooney. In the final, once again Liverpool, who the year before had come from behind to beat Milan 3-0. Kaká said that the final in Istanbul was one of the saddest moments of his career. They were sure they would win, but Liverpool managed to come from behind. Do it again, they would go all out and win the game. Any cost, Milan controlled the whole game and managed to beat the English side 2-1, with one of the goals Kaká providing a masterful assist. Finally, he would conquer Europe. Finally, he would take his message to the world. Kaká highlighted that moment as one of the happiest of his life. Everything went right. He was at the top. He was voted the best player in the tournament, as well as being the top scorer with 10 goals. And he wasn't even a striker. And a while later, Kaká had to have surgery to correct a myopia problem. I was scared, but I left it in God's hands. That surgery was decisive for him. If he didn't succeed, he could retire from soccer very early. But once again, he overcame a problem, and within weeks, he was back on the pitch, kicking ass again. He was amazing. Milan won the UEFA Super Cup over Sevilla 3-1 with a goal from Kaká. And in the Club World Cup, he shone once again as Boca Juniors suffered and lost 4-2 with a beautiful goal from the top scorer and a refined pass for Filippo Inzaghi's goal. But in December 2007, something would happen that would change the player's history, putting him on another level. He was voted the best player in the world ahead of, the young Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo, who would dominate the Best in the World award from then on. Messi both shone for their clubs that was out of the ordinary, nobody knew it, but Kaká would be the last Brazilian to be voted best in the world. Will it end this year? Let's see, right? He was so high up that the Times magazine placed him as one of the 100 most influential people in the world. Kaká was always a player who preferred his home and family to partying and partying. Many young players were inspired by him in terms of his technique and his behavior. The physical effort he demanded of his body in 2007 would take its toll. The following year, he suffered a knee injury that took him off the pitch for 3 months. Even so, he returned and in 41 games scored 19 goals, his best for Milan. That same year, he had a pubis problem follow him until the end of his career. Taking another break in 2009, Milan would become weaker despite having players like Ronaldinho Gaucho, David Beckham, Pirlo, and Dida. These players were nearing the end of their careers, so they were no longer the same Kaká saw in Milan. And Juventus, strengthening and building great squads, Milan could no longer confront its rivals, so he decided to leave. Manchester City, Europe's richest new club, made an offer of £120 million, which would be the biggest sale of a player in history if Kaká accepted the offer. The club had a policy of not selling its players, but £120 million isn't refused, so the club's president told Kaká that if he wanted to leave, they would sell him without any problems. But Kaká preferred to go to a club with more tradition and didn't want to take a chance on City, so he said that Milan doesn't usually sell its players. So if I left here, it would be to Real Madrid. That statement didn't last long because Real Madrid soon after offered him €65 million for his soccer. Knew that his time there wasn't over someday, he would be back in 6 years, 270 games for Milan, 95 goals and 5 titles soon after he signed with Real Madrid. When I arrived in Madrid, it hadn't been long since I had won the Ballon d'Or. What I can say is that everything I dreamed of and everything I tried, nothing, absolutely nothing worked out. But before we look at what happened with the Brazilian team at the Confederations Cup in 2009, he was one of the main highlights of that competition. He played a lot and was voted the best player in the tournament, and in general, Brazil didn't suffer too much to win. On his return to Real Madrid, the Whites were assembling their second generation of Galacticos with Cristiano Ronaldo, Kaká, Benzema, Sergio Ramos, and Higuain, as well as other soccer legends. When I arrived at Real, I was nervous about the presence of Kaká, said Cristiano Ronaldo. Everyone expected a lot from him, but once again his pubic ailment struck, his knee was injured. Problems with his muscles and injuries of all kinds kept him out of games. Jose Mourinho arrived at the club and didn't play him, but Kaká persevered and knew that he would do well at Real if he continued. And in his mind, there was no future in which he wouldn't be an idol for the Spanish team. But everything seemed to conspire against him. Mourinho preferred Ozio, and at every training session, Kaká would go up to Mourinho and say, "I can play, I want to play, I know. But I prefer Ozio." Mourinho rebutted. The months went by and the newspapers here in Brazil said he had to leave so as not to ruin his career, but Kaká refused. "I did everything you can imagine, everything the church asked for, everything the Bible says, but nothing worked." The real fans began to run out of patience and the Spanish press got on his back, said that he had to leave the club because he didn't want to play. But the truth was that he was often injured and couldn't get the rhythm of the game at the 2010 World Cup. He didn't play well, as did the whole team that was eliminated in the quarterfinals by the Netherlands. Florentino Perez saw Kaká's effort, but couldn't do anything about it. Mourinho was in charge of the team, and Perez was in charge of the club. He even said that Kaká could be given more opportunities, but he never questioned Mourinho. After all, he was his trusted coach, and he didn't want to create a crisis at the club. If need be, in the semis of the Champions Cup, 2013-2014, Kaká was on the bench in the game against Bayern. The game was tied and there were only 10 minutes to go, Mourinho called Kaká. At that moment, I was sure I was going to do something surprising. I was going to take Real to the final, revealed Kaká. Years later, the player entered, and with him the weight of having spent 4 years at Real Madrid and having done almost nothing, the weight of being his last year in the Spanish capital. And depending on what he did in those 10 minutes, he would define his future in the 10 minutes. Nothing happened in extra time either. But in the penalties Kaká missed and Real Madrid were eliminated because of a mistake he made, the club's fans were furious with him. Even going to the stadium, he was furious with himself too. When he got home, he thought, am I a player who won the Golden Ball? Or am I a bad player? Like everyone is saying who I am, Kaká couldn't believe that everything was falling apart, that everything he had built was over who I am. He thought the number of injuries he'd had in that period was unusual. Who I am? He kept thinking, but that same night the answer came from Vieira. I'm a son of God. I'm not going to let my performance get in the way of that. Ever at the end of his contract with Real Madrid, Florentino Perez said that Kaká had been one of the most professional players he'd ever worked with. No matter the bench or the constant injuries, he was always dedicating himself. Kaká is among the legends who have played for Real Madrid, and Jose Mourinho said years later that he also thought Kaká was amazing. But he preferred Ozil. Milan was determined to open its doors to him, and Kaká was determined to do well at the 2014 World Cup, win the title, and end his time with the Brazilian national team with 2 world titles. He signed for Milan again. His arrival at the club was full of tributes from the board and the fans who still loved him. But far from that Kaká, he was no longer the same, but he still helped Milan. But that Milan wasn't the club that once had Pirlo in his prime, Kaká in his prime, Shevchenko in his prime, and other soccer legends. That Milan was fighting just to qualify for the Champions League, and even then, it didn't succeed. Very important for him in the 3-0 win against Atalanta in the Italian Championship that year. He scored twice, reaching 100 goals for the club. Even the shirt was ready for celebration. This was not his last game for the club, but it would be considered one of the most important because it wouldn't be long before the Golden Boy was just another legend of Milan's magnificent history. Kaká wasn't called up for the 2014 World Cup and watched the 7-1 defeat from home. Milan said goodbye to Kaká with due honors, and Kaká said goodbye to the club that supported him for so many years, to the fans who were with him, even in the bad times at Real Madrid, to the city he lived in for over 7 years. That was the end of Kaká at Milan, and the end of an era, for an Italian giant that has been dormant to this day. After that, Milan was never the same again. In 2014, he moved to Orlando City, but the club loaned him to São Paulo so that he could finish his career there. Back at the club that revealed him, Kaká worked hard on his fitness, put on the number 8 shirt, and reappeared in front of more than 25,000 people at Morumbi, and had time to play some great games. He even scored on his debut in the 2-1 defeat away to Goiás, as well as playing a part in one of the most beautiful collective goals in Brazilian soccer in the decade against Sport in the Brasileirão, playing alongside Ganso, Pato, and Rogério Ceni, as well as Mauricio Romero at the helm. The midfielder was one of the highlights of that year's Brazilian runners-up, but his time at São Paulo was only to end his career at the club that revealed him and gave him all the support he needed in 2015. Kaká returned to Orlando City in 2015 and was one of the MLS's main names in the number 10 shirt. The legend won several individual awards, but didn't do much in 3 years at Orlando City, scoring 24 goals and 22 assists in 2017. Kaká announced his retirement from playing. Kaká, at his peak, was magical and was the only player who managed to star at the same time as Ronaldinho. Gaucho, all the others were overshadowed. Kaká at his peak surpassed Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi. Ronaldo and Lionel Messi? You don't think so? Kaká in his prime shone at AC Milan and raised the shield of that squad to the heights. He wasn't just another player who passed through soccer. No, Kaká was legendary. Kaká was spectacular. Tell me a midfielder as offensive as him, a midfielder who, when he set off, nobody caught him. Kaká in his prime was supreme and will never be forgotten. He was and is one of the immortal legends of world soccer. And then, what did you think of the video? Tell us here in the comments.